All right, here we are, guys, back for a guide here, and I'm going to keep this one, relatively short. This is probably the most covered hole on my entire channel, so if you need to know how to play this hole by now, you should have it figured out. I like Sniper 8 or Guardian 2. These are just the minimums that you need. Aside from that, pretty much the only two shots that you're probably going to see me ever hit, unless I absolutely have to. We can do hammerhead. It's going to require a 6, or we'll have to switch over to a rough bump. So there's technically two ways to play something. If you're under club and don't have these minimum levels that I'm writing out here, then you'll have to do this. You'll probably have to do what I'm drawing over here. So here's it's going to be cat 6 as well. And as I mentioned, if you don't have these minimum levels, then you'll have to go right here over off this rough bump. And with the rough bump, it's usually right around 1 top spin. So if I was to set up my handy dandy tool here, the spin isn't going to change too much. It's right about 1. This might be for a tailwind, maybe maybe 0.75. Really doesn't need to change too much. For the most part, you're going to have, and these are top spin values. 1 1/4, 1 1/4. It's also going to require some curl, so I usually use right about half or so. So right about here, if that's my screen, right about half curl on the screen for that shot to be able to do that. Now, in terms of my ring adjustment for this specific area, I'll usually use just a little bit under maybe mid club. So if I'm at side, head, and tail. So what I'll usually do for this hole is, this is one of the few clubs that I never really used max adjustment. I would just kind of use whatever the club is, because we really don't need to ever go into, crazy situations. But for the head, I do use max. For the mid, I use mid. For the tail, I usually use close to min. But for this bump, I'll usually use also mid in this situation. Let's talk about the island hop, which is what I usually do. So let me zoom in here, and I try to aim here. And the person that wins this usually plays the right amount of wind effect. So you'll see the guys who continuously miss this up, they don't have proper wind effect play. And what I'll usually use, these are backspin values, is right about 5.5. Seems to be the sweet spot. And for a tailwind, you'll want to start cranking this up. So you'll see that I'll use 6, 6.5. And I'll also need to come off of this, depending on how strong. I used to use as low as 4, but for this tour, let's just say 4.5 and 5. And one of the reasons that the wind's a little bit less in Tour 9 than it used to be in 11. So there's pretty much no situation where you'll probably need 4 anymore, because the wind just won't be able to get up high enough, 13, 14 miles per hour like it used to in Tour 11. So 4.5, and you always want to offset that guide or whatever curl. I usually play the mid distance number on this. So for side, it's also mid. For tail, I actually play min. And for head, I play max. So this is actually, one of the most straightforward holes in the game with the way that it plays. And it's very consistent. The island shot's very easy to hit. That's the way that you're going to want to go. Pretty much this route, once you master this shot, this is almost obsolete. It's like a rookie level shot, because you can always hit this one in there tight. Whereas when you hit this, there's kind of some mounds here and the way that it comes off is going to be a little bit less consistent to where it won't roll out the same each and every time. Whereas if you start to master wind effect, you know, this is a very good hole for you to master wind effect, because you have to land it in the center of this island. So the only way you can win this hole is by mastering wind effect. It's the most wind effect, you know, defined holes ever in this entire game. So if you want to, you know, take your game to the next level, learning wind effect, this hole is, you know, the quintessential hole for mastering wind effect, because you have to hit this tiny island, which leaves no room for error. If your wind effect game is off, then you don't hit it within a yard. If it's on point, then no matter what the wind is, you can still get it to a yard every time. So good luck with that one, guys. See you guys on the next tutorial.